Hello, hello. Hello, everyone. Hello, Internet. Yeah, good afternoon. Both Andy and me are East Coast, so it's a little past 30 minutes past noon. So good morning if you're West Coast or Mountain Time, any other time zone, and good afternoon, good evening to the rest of the world. Welcome to Coded Live. Welcome. Andy, my friend, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. So this is going to be a slightly different type of a stream for us. It's going to be long, like a 2-hour stream. So my name is Sam Basu. I'm a dev advocate at Progress Software. With me, I have Andy Wieland. Andy, what do you do?
What's that?
What do you do?
What do I do? I am a sales engineering manager, so I run the sales engineering team for our DevTools product lines. So that ranges from WinForm controls and Silverlight even that we still have, the Kendo flavors, all of those technologies, the JavaScript control sets, as well as now the new Blazor and all the other products, all the other great products. Of course, I work very closely and have worked very closely for years with our Test Studio product, which is our QA automation software.
I'm blown away by what some of you do. Like, that's a whole range of things you talked about. Like, that's across .NET, JavaScript, and Test Studio. It in itself is a beast. So thank you for what you do. That's a lot. I wish I was smart enough to do half of what you do.
I have a good team, that's for sure.
And you have a very good shirt. I love that. Do you and Test, bro?
There you go.
Do you and Test? All right, folks. So here's what we're going to do. So Andy and me just came out of a webinar we did. We had a big release for R3, which is where we put out all the newest bits for Telerik and Kendo UI and reporting and testing and productivity suites. So we tried to cover that throughout the week. And every week we are taking an hour to do the webinar to kind of talk about the product updates. And then we step down here in Twitch where we can relax a little bit. I don't know, Andy, if you can see a different me, like I'm not in my formal shirt anymore. I lost the gel in my hair. This is me. I'm in my hat and I'm relaxed. Yeah. I did. What did you have for lunch? Like we had like 10 minutes.
Oh, just a quick turkey sandwich.
Yeah. I had a frozen meal, which I didn't eat much of it. So, well, we're here. So, hello. Guess who shows up here? Mr. Fast Food Chickens. Yeah, chickens are a thing on our streams here. I don't know how it got started. Chickens and donuts, that's a big thing on our channels. Okay, so here's how we're going to do the next 2 hours. So we have me and Andy here to start things off, and I'm actually going to let Andy drive. So we are kind of flipping the way we did the webinar. We're going to start with testing solutions, and Andy has some very cool demos when it comes to testing Blazor applications, because Blazor is kind of eating the world. It's everywhere, right? So we can't get away without talking about Blazor. And hello, our good friend Kira's Drive is here. Hello, good to see you. Good to see you, buddy. All right, so Andy's going to do that for about I don't know, however long Andy wants to speak. And then we are going to have Mr. Blazor King join us himself. That's Mr. Ed Charbonneau. I love Blazor. So more Blazor fun. We talked about JustMock, which is our mocking unit testing solution. And we're going to talk about JustMock with some Blazor. And then hopefully if Andy and leave me some time to spare, then I'll go into reporting solutions. And while we speak, by the way, Mr. Ed Charbonneau just raided us with his party. Hello, Raiders. Good to see you all. Yeah, welcome, Raiders.
Hey, everybody.
So Ed is apparently living his entire day on the internet today. So he was streaming, which I'm guessing he's streaming on Blazor, and now he's back here with us with the chicken. So we're going to let Ed go grab a sandwich or something. And in the meantime, we'll talk. So Test Studio first, then JustMock, then we'll talk about reporting, and you're going to see me fail at coding, but that's the fun of it. All right, so Andy, do you want to start sharing your screen?
Sure. Yeah, speaking of failure, that's what we
hey,
that's what we're going to focus on today.
What happens here is the only thing that could have happened.
Yeah. All right, are you seeing it now?
I do see it. Let's go ahead and add your screen here. There you go. Nice and
Cool.
bright.
Well, this should look pretty familiar. For those of you that came off of our webinar, we were just inside of Visual Studio talking about Test Studio Dev Edition. And for those of you that haven't seen it, this is one entry point into Test Studio's test automation. It is delivered as a Visual Studio plugin. And for those of you that are Telerik users already, just pulling up the control panel, you will see that if you have DevCraft Ultimate, you have Test Studio Dev Edition already. It is part of our DevCraft Ultimate package. As you can see here, it will show up as Telerik Test Studio Dev. Mine is saying it's incompatible because I actually have the full version of Test Studio Ultimate on my machine already. So that's what you're seeing there. If you do have Test Studio Ultimate, you get both a standalone testing environment that I'll definitely show you a little bit of here in a moment, and you also get the Visual Studio plugin. So any version of Visual Studio, I believe we go back to 2000. I think we're back to 2010 kind of area of support still. But basically, any Visual Studio Pro version that allows for plugins can work with the Test Studio plugin.
So when you, like, dumb question, when you get this for the first time, do you always get the standalone one?
You don't always. So if you have that's a great question, because the only way to get Test Studio Dev Edition by itself is part of the DevCraft Ultimate bundle.
Okay.
But if you get Test Studio Ultimate, you also get the Dev Edition. So that's the other way, the two ways to get it, either as a part of the DevCraft Ultimate bundle or as part of Test Studio Ultimate itself.
Got it.
So, so that's a little bit about what we're looking at. Really, from a standpoint of test automation, we really like to bring everybody together. We talk to so many different customers who want to have UI testing as part of their pipeline and their process for continuous improvement, continuous delivery. And that's perfectly fine. We hear it a lot. So we do have some integration points that help you with that. And we have an approachable testing tool and really workshop that can be leveraged for your BAs, your business associates as well, or business analysts, I should say, as well as your quality analysts, your QAs. So non-technical users make up about 60% of our user base. The other 40% are actually developer testers. So just to give you a sense of where people are coming from.
Yeah, so like, talk to me as a developer. Like, if I am building a Blazor app or any other web or mobile-based app, like, where do I even start? Like, you got me a Visual Studio plugin. How do I start?
Well, that's a good question. So, and you'll talk more about the unit testing side of things with Just Mock, but where Test Studio comes in is when you have a UI. So this is functional UI testing. Also, we do cover load testing. And we've also got some responsive design testing. So taking your app and then working on it in different form factors for kind of a mobile view of it. But to begin, I have here a Test Studio project. When you start a new project after you've installed the plugin, you will get the Test Studio project type. There's both a C# and a VB project template that are installed with the plugin. So you can open that up, and what you'll have essentially is the ability here to begin creating your test. So right up here at my project level, I'm just going to add a new test. We can see there's a web test in here. We do support WPF automation as well, so you can build your test for any web technologies. And I know for those of you that saw the webinar, we talked a lot about how Test Studio has natural support for Telerik controls, but I don't want to leave it there. We do work with any web technologies, third-party or custom controls as well. So you're not just limited to testing Telerik applications, but there's no better solution for testing Telerik applications with the integrations that we've created. And in addition to the test, we have test lists. And what good is a test on its own? Really, most people are building a list of tests and then running their list of tests as maybe part of their build process or on a schedule. We do have some scheduling capabilities where you can have your tests run that way. All right, so I got a brand new test in here, and let me see. I believe it's this one I just added. Oops, that's not that one. This one. There we go, a blank test. This is where we're going to start out. Now, Test Studio has a really powerful recording capability. You can absolutely code everything, but there is so much benefit here to recording. A lot of our customers like to keep tests codeless. And I'll show you what that looks like. And that way, from a developer standpoint, you just don't want to add technical debt, right? If you don't have to, you don't want to have more code to maintain if you don't have to. And with Test Studio, you can actually hand over some of that test maintenance, if not all of that test maintenance, to your non-technical users and become sort of a more collaborative across QA and development. So let's start one up here. As you mentioned, I do have a nice little Blazor sample app here that I'm going to pick at, and we'll start this up with Chromium Edge here. So you can record from any of these 4 browsers, and I should mention our tests are cross-browser compatible. So you don't need a test for each browser. You need one test that works on all of them. So we'll start with Chromium Edge here.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah, it's great. And already you can see I've got the navigate step captured for me. You can see that the browser's up, and I'm going to do my best here to kind of share things all on one screen. In the real world application, it's good to have the dual monitor set up. You can have your Visual Studio on one side, your application window, your web browser on the other display. That makes it a little easier. But for demo purposes, we're going to pile it all on one screen here.
I mean, in real world, you cannot do this kind of testing without like an 80-inch ultra wide, obviously, right?
Yes, definitely.
You want to see everything.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and we'll just add a email in here, and we'll add a password here, and we'll click login. And so I'm just doing things like a normal user would do. So you hit record, you go through, and you can see that it's capturing all of these actions, and it's capturing these elements. And that's key. Test Studio handles your element maintenance for you. It basically captures them, and I'll show you how these elements are going to be identified. But it captures and records those for you. It stores them in a central element explorer, and you'll be able to edit those and maintain those elements too. So here we have a very basic test so far. Tests can be done this way. This is all actions here. So you see all these lightning bolts. Those show up okay for you, Sam?
Yes, yes. And I'm just trying to post the link to the app that you're showing, because like that's a public app.
Oh yeah, for sure. Now, of course, this app doesn't have a real sign-in. You can put whatever you want. You can even just click the sign-in button, right? But for any purpose of a real application, you're probably going to have a login process, and it's one of the first tests that people typically create. It's also sometimes one of the hardest tests to create and to work with, because you're dealing with your security mechanisms. You're dealing with sometimes encryption, where you may want to encrypt your password in your test, so somebody can't come and steal that. And those are the kinds of things that you'll see that we have built in. So for example, here in the properties of this test step, I have an encrypt option. I can enable this to, whoops, I got to hit to true, enable that to true.
And actually, Andy, just for a second, like I know you were doing stuff at the bottom of the screen. Mr. Morris is asking if we're recording it. Yes, absolutely. So give us like a few hours or a day or so. We'll push this out to YouTube. So absolutely, please share it with your QA teams.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Yep, so we were down here in the bottom corner, and I just basically turned the encrypt to true. You can see that in the test step itself.
Nice.
Grade this out. I can't change it. And the beautiful thing about encryption is it's a one-way thing, right? So I can't turn this back to false. There is another option here called is password. You can see that it automatically turned that on too. So encryption includes is password. Or I could just go and use is password, which will do the same thing, but it's undoable, right? That's the difference between those two. And there's lots of tooling here. And really what we do with Test Studio is we've built a lot in so that you can make adjustments on the fly. For example, maybe we need an asynchronous kind of transaction, right? We can actually add in a timeout. We have a timeout actually built in for that, but let's say we need it to come back with a particular request. We can, well, 5 seconds is a little bit too much there, but maybe add 2 seconds there. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow for any pending request up to 2 seconds to give it that time before it tries to go on to the next step, basically. So there's a lot of thought put into Test Studio to make it real easy to use. We have built-in timeouts as well for each step. So each step has up to 15 seconds by default to locate the element in question. And in this one, it's just this text box. This Blazor button down here, for example, it has up to 15 seconds to locate that. If it doesn't, it will fail the test and say, hey, we couldn't find the element. If it finds it within 2 seconds, it'll move more quickly. So using timeouts in testing really gives you that leeway for a slower load or a different system. You may run your tests in staging and then even run them again in production and see there's a little bit different in the timing. And Test Studio has that built in, so it can, same test can work on all those cases.
Nice. So Andy, if you want to pause for just 1 second, I don't know if you see the question on screen from Curious Drive. So what's our strategy when it comes to going to crossing a domain, you go onto a different web page? Do you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if we're actually going to a different page, and let me go ahead and bring my recorder back up. So we're still in a live record mode here. I could certainly go navigate somewhere, right? Or in this particular app, if I click issues, it's going to go to a different page, the /issues page. I don't need a navigate step for that, because that action inside of the application of clicking issues, it's captured here, and it automatically did the navigation. So I really only have one navigate step at the top of this test. But in your case, let's say you do want to navigate to another site. Well, we could actually put that in to the toolbar here, right? And we can go ahead and click that, navigate forward. And now you can see that it's captured that navigate forward step in here. It also, we do have another option in our step builder. So step builder is kind of full of pre-built stuff for you to add into your test. And one of those options is another navigate to. So there's really a lot of ways to go about it, whether you're doing it from the recording toolbar or in this case from the step builder. You'll easily be able to put the appropriate navigate step in place for your case.
Oh, this is nice. Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, I'm so glad that we are taking the time to talk a lot more about reporting and testing, because these are core pieces of how we ship software.
Definitely. Application health, super important, right? And the ability to stay on top of that and have automation running so that it tells you when to pay attention to an issue. And that way you don't have to spend all your time just constantly going through tests, right? The manual testing way is sort of, seeing an evolution, right? You can still manually test. You can have manual testers, and certainly you'll probably not going to automate absolutely everything, but certainly a tool like this takes a manual tester and makes them very powerful.
Absolutely. Do you see the question from Mr. Morris?
Yeah, I see our app will pop open Azure authentication in a pop-up window, different domain. Can the test sign in via the pop-up and then resume testing? Another great question. With pop-ups, we do automatically capture and detect either modal or HTML-based pop-ups. If it's an HTML-based pop-up, it will have a connect to pop-up step. And I believe that even is built in. Now, this stuff is automatically recorded. And I may even have a good example in a different app. I don't know that this one has pop-ups inside of it. But in any respect, we do work with modals. We do work with HTML pop-ups and also Windows dialogues, right? So if in the case of a login process, you'll see under our step builder, there is a list of dialogues like log on, upload, download, things like that. And here's that connect to pop-up as well. So
yes.
this is can be added in. Now, this is where I'm adding these in manually, but keep in mind, they automatically get recorded when you interact with your application, and this happens on the fly. Test Studio is going to capture that. You don't have to add it manually unless you needed to, for some reason, add one manually, right? So here, if I wanted to add a generic dialogue handler, I could give it a title, and I could tell it what button to push and stuff like that.
And you got a follow-up thing from Curious Drive. How about encrypting passwords before storing it in action? I'm guessing like on a pop-up?
Encrypting it before storing it, that's something we probably have to look at in the recording portion of it. We probably have to do the encryption kind of there rather than after the fact. So something I'd have to ask our developers to see if it's doable. But that's a new one. I haven't heard of that actually before.
Mm-hmm. Well, good job, Curious Drive, in stumping us.
Stumped me, yeah, right away.
Yeah, good stuff. Yep.
So let me take you back here for a moment, because there's a lot of tooling here. And one of the things I wanted to show is this element highlighter. This little guy, basically allows you to inspect the application, right? It's very similar to the DevTools kind of highlighting capability and inspection options. But with our highlighter, you can see that it can extrapolate the layers, right? This is a grid. In fact, it's a Blazor grid. And our built-in translators recognize that this is a Blazor grid because, so that's nice automatic. You don't have to do it. If I go to a different kind of grid, it's not one of our own, it would still give me some more generic layers like this HTML table layer. But this is specifically recognizing through our translators that's a Telerik Blazor grid. And not only does it recognize it, it also gives us some really cool capabilities. Like we could see if the grid's groupable, or if it's currently grouped, or how many selected items there are, or how many items count there are. So some of these are built-in verification options that are brought to us by this translator. They kind of go above and beyond. So you get some bonus features. When you're working with Telerik Controls and Test Studio together, not only is it going to work really well from an automation standpoint, but you get these kind of bonus options as well, these verifications and things that you can quickly add in. And verifications are important. That's how we make our tests bulletproof. That's how we make sure that, once we get to the screen, we're going to verify that after we expanded this, maybe that it says closed, for example, we can very quickly go in and actually verify text contains closed. Earlier in our webinar, we also talked about OCR. We have added the ability to use OCR as well. I don't need it for this particular example, but in those cases where you've got a Canvas or an SVG or PDF file that you want to get text from or verify something in, that is what that OCR does for you.
Another question from Mr. Morris.
Can I add a step with custom code in so I can clear down my database and reseed it before each test? Beautiful question. So yes, you absolutely can. What you can do is you could either at the project level put in, I'd probably recommend at the project level adding it as a code item, a code file, and basically create yourself a helper class file. And this helper class file could then be used at that project level potentially by multiple tests, right? In some tests, if we take this test, for example, and let's say we'll take this click issues link. We can right click on this and just edit this in code. So before I do this, I just want to note that you can keep your tests codeless. There's really a lot of maintenance capability. So again, I could be developer creating a test and maybe just hand this test over to my QA and say, hey, here's a test for you, or vice versa. Sometimes the QAs create the tests and the developers maybe access them and run them when they need to. But when you do need to, you can edit something. It's going to convert this into code, and it's going to generate the code behind file for that test. So previously, there was no .cs for that test, and now there is, right? So as soon as I either convert something to code, or if I go to my step builder and use the coded step option, those are two ways for me to generate my code behind file. And once it does that, you can see it's taken that step, and it's basically now a coded step here. And back in our test, it leaves behind this reference. So this keeps the rest of the test codeless, I can still have my non-technical resources keep up and maintain this test. And then when they need my help on a coded feature, like the setup and teardown routine that you mentioned, then I'll step in, right? So either in this case, converting something to code, or in the case of the setup and teardown routines, I would add a helper class file for that. And also, before I jump off that topic, we do have a really good, newly updated, I should mention, list of documents and documentation. And under our advanced topics are 2 topics that are pretty popular lately. One of them is build server automation. So for those of you that are thinking, I like what I'm seeing with Test Studio, and I'll show you a lot more of it here in a moment. But if you want to make sure it fits into your CI/CD pipeline, you can see there's lots of different options here. Azure DevOps, Jenkins, we have a Jenkins plugin. Goes back into some of the older versions of TFS as well. But lots of options for the build server integration. But the other thing I wanted to show you here to answer that question was the code samples. Lots of code samples. So we do a ton of stuff without needing code, but when it's necessary, we try to give you some help. So here's a custom scripts before or after the test run using on our on after test completed or on before test started methods. And you can basically come in and grab this stuff. You see there's both C# and VB options. And we can just grab this and paste it into our coded step.
Yeah, you pretty much read the chat room's mind here. Mr. Morris was asking about Azure build pipelines. And I mean, this kind of goes back to what I think Peter said. Like, everybody has a seat at the table. Like, we are all cogs in the wheel, and like DevOps and testing is closer and closer to dev, as you can imagine. So the answer is yes, right, to this one.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And this really takes you through, creating self-hosted agent, pretty much how you're going to go about it. What it really boils down to at the end of the day is adding essentially a call to the Test Studio framework. And I'll just get down here to it, adding a command line step. And as you can see here, it's just basically calling the Art of Test runner, which is our test runner. And it's telling it to run a particular list of tests. So I probably have a regression list built up of maybe over 100 tests that we want to run as part of a build process. And here at the end is a JUnit. That's the output format that we're specifying for this case. There's a lot of different output format options. In this case, this example is using JUnit. And then actually it's using a published test results step as well in this example. So really good example here to work with.
And Curious Drive, thank you for that. Docs is an interesting thing. Like, I mean, without the right docs, like if we struggle as developers, that's not good for anybody or any product where the audience is the developer. And I mean, same can be said about like Microsoft Docs. A lot of energy gets poured into the docs, and it doesn't always have like an immediate ROI, but this is so important, so critical to make sure we have all the examples that people can come across while they're building. And let me see, another question from Kobolda PG. We keep the passwords in the DB local. I'm not sure if I'm following that question. Andy, do you know what this might mean?
I think this may be actually Peter chiming in. I appreciate the help, Peter.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's Peter. How would I know? It's the internet. We all have.
Yeah, I know. I recognize that.
We all have pet names. We don't know. Yeah, thank you, Peter. Peter is the team lead and one of the core engineers behind Test Studio. So yes, so he's actually answering Mr. Morris's question. So thank you, Peter. Yes. We see you.
Perfect.
All right.
So I made a little bit of execution there. If anybody saw, I'll rerun this as well. But I wanted to show you what happens when we have a failure, right? And this site, by the way, is very dynamic. I think this Ed can probably talk all about it. He probably built it, but it's changing every time I go to it. It's changing, right? So it's a great example of just a basic little app here, but of dynamic situations and how Test Studio works in dynamic situations. So here we actually had a failure. So I want to show you some of the most critical part of the critical information that Test Studio provides and how it fits into your process. So whether it's non-technical testers or SDETs or developers that are doing the testing, the failure details is one of the best parts of Test Studio, because it captures all this data for you, where if you were looking at this from a manual process, you'd have to do a lot of work to put together this failure details, right?
And Andy, hold that thought for just 1 second. Since we are talking Blazor, might as well bring our good friend Ed in. There you go, Mr. Ed.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Hey, Ed.
We are hanging out here and risking our lives talking about Blazor without you. All right, so Andy, go on.
Hey, Ed. So yeah, this was the failure that occurred. It was trying to verify this contains the word closed on this closed span, right? So that's what it was looking for. And here's your first glimpse at how Test Studio identifies a particular element, right? So this is a combination of a class and a tag name. So tag name being a more generic identifier, tells us what type of element we're looking for. In this case, a span. And then in this case, it used the class of badge-danger to locate that element. That means the element doesn't have to be in a certain spot. That's the beauty of Test Studio, is you can continue to evolve your application without breaking your entire test backlog. And so this gives us that information, tells us what's going on. You'll see that it was unable to locate the element. It did look for it based off of the image, so that kicks in. Our image search capability does help locate elements when find logic fails. So if this fails, if this changes, it may break a test or two. I'll show you how easy it is to fix that. But when it does break, not only is it easy to fix, but it also comes with a backup. So oftentimes this type of failure with Test Studio and the image backup, it can actually keep the test moving and then give you a warning and say, hey, your element changed. You may want to go fix it, but your test passed because we were able to still find the element a different way. So that's kind of what's happening in the background with Test Studio. The data, again, that you get here, all of this stuff, the steps to reproduce the issue here in the test log tells me what browser and version I was running against, what steps passed, what steps failed here, the timing it took to run as well. So lots of great data here.
Yeah, this is gold. Like, I have worked with so many like manual testing scenarios where you just cannot recreate things, and this is brilliant.
It's great. The exception log is there as well. And then there's images, and this is cool. It really shows us the expected state here on the right, expected to see closed, and the failed state on the left. So it looks like maybe we didn't expand. Maybe we maybe missed a step, or we can go back and troubleshoot that a little bit. So this really gives you that view to see, is this what that conversation that you had with your QA about, well, what were you trying to do? What did you expect to happen? All of that can be eliminated because this is capturing it all for you.
Yeah, you just walk over to their desk, and in these times you can't.
Yeah, exactly. We also capture the page DOM at the point of failure, so you can inspect that, see what was going on behind the scenes. And really what this failure details is all about is it's allowing the person responding to this to think, is this an application issue or a test issue? And can I fix this myself, or do I need help fixing this? And depending on who you are in the mix, you may be able to fix it yourself. It may be an application issue, just depending on your range of technical skills. But it's really there to help that QA potentially figure out what can I do with this. So this is the Resolve Failure tab assumes that it's the test that's at fault. So it gives me the opportunity to fix the break, and potentially, in this case, update a class or something that might be off or different. In the case of this particular issue, it didn't look like it made it to that spot. So I'm not going to blame this. This might still be correct. It's just that we didn't have that expansion step. So we'll go back and look at that.
What I like about the the page DOM feature here is if the QA is running a test, it captures that information, so it kind of weeds out that works on my machine mentality.
Yes.
Where the developer's running it, it works fine here, but then the QA opens it with a different machine. Maybe there's a different version of Windows or whatever it is. that causes that to blow up, and now you have evidence of what happened.
Exactly. Yeah. Great information. And all of this information can be easily communicated. So this creates the feedback loop that you've been needing, right? Down at the bottom, I have copy, I have export, I have the resolve option if it's, the test that's at fault that I need to fix. But I have this submit bug. And I think I have this project. Yeah, I do already have this project in Azure. It populates the name, the description for me, and it's going to attach the failure details. So a non-technical user doesn't even know necessarily what page DOM is, but as you pointed out, Ed, that's really important data to bring to the development team to say, hey, we have an issue. So all they need to do to communicate that is click submit. And
I like this. Yeah, it's like an end-to-end loop.
Yeah, your feedback loop, right? So now I've communicated to my dev team, whoever's triaging the bugs can see that bug 164 just came in, and in that bug is going to be an attachment with the images, the DOM, the log files are all going to be there.
Those go directly to Sam, right?
Yeah.
Well, speaking of me, if I may take a second, so TCARTIC 2020, thank you for joining in. And I am not important enough, clearly. So like these two guys come in and they just kick me off. For the webinar, we did reporting first and then JustMock and then Test Studio. So we are kind of flipping it. So these two folks want to go first. So we are doing Test Studio and testing automation. And then Ed is here to talk about JustMock. And then if they leave me any time, and my code doesn't compile, so good luck with that. I will go into reporting. Yes, so you have not missed anything.
Super. Well, I'll troubleshoot this one, and then I'll get out of your hair. There's so much to Test Studio. There's so much that we can do with it. It's really, really powerful. But I'm going to actually use this run to here feature. This is going to execute the test up to that point, so we can really see what was it that we were missing. And actually, I think we clicked into issues. I remember that. We converted that to code. And then I had a couple verifications there. So we did miss a step, it looks like. So it'll make it easy. We can just jump back in and we can re-record that step or modify it. So this is a brilliant thing about Test Studio. And it is something I have to kind of break people of bad habits or people that have had exposure to other tools and other frameworks, is that you don't have to throw your test away. It's easily evolved with Test Studio. And oftentimes no code is needed to do that evolving or that evolution. So here we can see it executing. I have annotations turned on, so it's giving us that red and yellow highlighting along the way. And here's the point where, as you can see, it's dropped us into live record mode. We're currently recording, and it's passed steps 1 through 6. Now I believe, I'm not sure which one of these it was, but we can use this highlighter. We can maybe do a verification if we wanted to, verify something there. Also, there's mouse actions in here like hover over. We also record drag and drop. So there's lots of things that are just right here at your fingertips that you can build into your test. I'm just going to simply expand this. Sorry, go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, one thing I think is really cool is you can put manual steps in there as well. So if you have something that's not something you can automate for some reason or another, you need the user's input for some reason, they can manually look at the page and decide whether it's passing or failing on that step.
That's great. And that actually comes from our step builder. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot to mention test to step and API test to step. These are really, really powerful. A good example of test to step is, let's say this login process. This is just these 4 steps is our login process, right? Well, maybe I have 100 different scenarios that start with A, login, and B, go do something else. Well, here I could take this and actually create a test to step from these 4 steps. And we'll call this Blazor login, for example. And I'll hit create. This is going to add a new test to my project. And if we go back and look at the test itself, you can see that it starts this test with execute test Blazor login. So I've taken my test and now made it into a subtest. Essentially, I've just taken the login portion, made it into its own subtest, and now I can call that So the other 100 tests I need to create that start with A, log in, and B, go do something else, I can leverage the same login for every one of those. It doesn't duplicate it. It just creates a new reference for it. And so that's what you're left behind with, is a really clean call to execute the test like that.
Yeah.
All right.
I like it. You know, Curious Drive is giving us kudos here. It is very cool. And yes, I mean, we are biased because we make this stuff, like, I don't know, you can tell, like, all three of us are old. And we have been through a lot of crappy software development. We have been consultants. We have seen products like this fail and just mess up your workflow. So it's good to be able to find something that we can stand behind and just pour in more and more improvements to make, like, I mean, this is not just automation. Like, you're filling in the manual parts. Like you say, you're coding the things that you want to have the customized tests. So yeah, I like it.
Yeah, you point out things that are really important to developers, like being able to do that test the step. You said it didn't create a copy, it actually created a reference, which is way more important to developers, because we know how quickly copies of things can go awry. Because if something changes in that process, then you have to go update 50 copies of it. And if it's a reference, then we just update it once and we're good to go everywhere. That's
great. Yep. And so I've dove in here to a particular element. I wanted to show you guys kind of what's happening under the surface a little bit. So I came down here, and one thing that's great is Test Studio gives you some connection between what's my test step and what element is being used by the test step. So whatever test step I click on, it correspondingly is going to highlight and put an arrow next to the corresponding element, right? So kind of just some ease of use stuff that we've built in. So what I did is I right-clicked on that element and I said edit element. And that brought me to here, which is this basically showing the current combination, like we saw in the failure details, the class combined with the tag name. So this was how Test Studio decided we're going to find this element later. So during recording, all we did was click on it, or what did we do on this? Oh, we just did a verification on it. Test Studio added it to the project and said, okay, we're going to find it by its class and its tag name and that combination, right? So we're not using the paths. You can see it also brings us suggestions. So this is the screen you use to edit an element. Again, not requiring code to do this, but a nice GUI screen you can get into. You can see suggestions. So these are the other elements, properties that Test Studio was able to find for this. And I may change things up. I could say, well, let's use the text content, you know, and maybe make it more specific, or, you know, change things out, maybe take the class out of that, for example. Or if I wanted to do something more position based, there are some options here. And you'll see this is really ranked from strong to weak, right? So there are paths. People always ask about Xpaths because Selenium is so prevalent on the marketplace. And that's typically what you're using in a Selenium type of environment. Test Studio is not built on Selenium, by the way. It is our own proprietary Telerik testing framework that it's built on, and it's a .NET-based framework. So no Selenium here. If you do want to use Xpaths, you could do that. I don't know why you would, though. So I always tell people, if you get into an automation challenge and you're trying to address it with Test Studio, and you think that Xpath is the only way, please call me, because I'll show you that there's a lot stronger, more resilient ways to typically locate elements that don't require paths.
Do you see Mr. Morris's question, Andy?
I do. Our process is upload files in an Azure function. Can I add a loop that clicks button X every 100 milliseconds until a new row appears in Telerik Blazor Grid? That's great. Yes, you can. In fact, what you could do more specifically would be to add a while loop, right? So we actually have down here in our step builder some conditions, conditional logic options. If else, and while loop, and loop. Now, if else, pretty self-explanatory. Everybody knows what if else is. And while loop, both of these, I'll just add all of them here. The loop is very basic. The loop says X number of times we are going to, let's say, use this. We're going to add this click span. So I'm just dragging and dropping that inside that loop. So I can basically say I want it to click this span 6 times. Real basic loop, right? A while loop relies on a verification. So having these verifications in here actually is what helps us create the syntax, actually creates that while statement. So while the text contains closed, then I'll do X, right? And one of the things I use a while loop for, a really good example, is I've got a test. In fact, it's one of these over here if you'd like to see, that will loop through a grid looking for a particular item in the grid, Northwind database product item, right? But looking for a particular item, and it goes page by page through that grid with a while loop. And it says, while that item doesn't exist, go to the next page. And then it scans again. While it doesn't exist, go to the next page. And so it can always go as deep as it needs to into the grid until it finds that particular item. And then it comes out of the while loop and it continues with whatever that automation requires. Great question. And actually the if else is just as simple, if else. The difference here is you can drag and drop different branches, right? And you could even nest these. So a banking customer of ours said, hey, we've got these security questions. It's either going to be the dog's name, the maiden name, or the street address, something like that. Those three questions are going to come up, but we never know which question or which order. How do we automate for that? Well, what we did in that case is a nested if else. So if dog's name, then Fido, else if mother's maiden name, then Jones. And so you can actually put an if inside the else, and that way you can nest those, and it can be very, very smart about finding the right thing. And then one more thing to sweeten that is you could take your test to steps, your subtests, and drop those into your branches as well. So that's a great thing to use with if else, is these nice test to steps that will really kind of create a choose your own adventure type of workflow for you.
Yeah, I like it. I see Mr. Mars and Ed are typing away and banging away at their keyboards. Not with dad jokes, thankfully, this time. Why would you buy a PlayStation 5 when you see the new Xboxes? Have you seen those things? The diskless thing is awesome. And Ed, you talked about it. Like, we are still at a point where we are able to beat our kids games, but they're getting faster and faster. So I might need to get something just for myself in my office that nobody touches, so I can.
I just want to
sharp.
I just want to clarify the context there, Sam. You mean beat your kids at video games?
Yes.
Not like
let's not let anyone take that out of context.
Yeah.
Where nobody's beating any kids. We don't need anybody showing up for a checkup at the house.
All right, Andy. This is awesome. I had not looked at RStudio for a while, and it's great to see the kind of stuff we have built.
For sure.
Yeah.
There's plenty more. You guys, we're happy to. I should mention too, there's a full trial on our website. You can even look us up at I think teststudio.com. Goes to the Telerik Test Studio, and download a trial, 30-day full functional trial. We don't have a trial of the Dev Edition, but it is built into the Ultimate trial. So if you get the Ultimate trial, you'll have the ability to try both the Visual Studio plugin and this standalone environment that I brought up over here as well. So we kind of call this the QA edition because they don't need to have Visual Studio typically. There is a built-in IDE here too, I should mention. So when you do have a test with code, you can certainly still work in this. It doesn't require Visual Studio. It does have IntelliSense and things like that. So you can certainly get in here and start coding.
That's actually a really nice feature to have because those would normally require additional licenses of Visual Studio to do that. Of course, there's always things like Visual Studio Code that's free, but it's nice to have something built in and not have to have an additional license tacked on top of it.
For sure.
And Mr. Morris, when we do upload to YouTube, it's just off the Telerik channel. I don't have it handy, but I can look it up. But just search for Telerik. That's where everything goes.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right, Andy. This was good. Anything else you want to show on your desktop?
No, I could go on all day. But,
I bet you can.
Yeah, please definitely feel free to try the trial. Get in touch with us. We'd be happy to do some demonstrations for anybody that's interested, either new technology or whatever. So we're just happy to thankful that we're able to be a part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And in the meantime, like Code It Live, like that's voice of God, just typing in stuff for you. Is there a version for Mac?
Currently, no. It is a desktop PC application, and we do have some interests in that. So feel free to jump in our feedback portal and vote.
I'm going to raise my hand to say yes. Yeah. I'm on a Mac.
My condolences, Sam.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Morris and QS Drive and everybody else, thank you for hanging out with us here. So Andy, feel free to drop off, have a decent lunch while Ed and me keep at this.
Awesome. Well, I much appreciate it, guys. Have fun slinging some code, and check us out. Don't forget, do you even test?
Love that shirt. All right, thank you, Andy. Yep.
Bye, everyone.
It's really great stuff, though. I think there's a really good testing story developing with Blazor and all of this stuff. And I'm going to kind of put the middle piece in. So in my opinion, there's the kind of testing that we do starts off with unit testing, right? And then we get into some more like integration type of testing. And then the stuff Andy shows with the end-to-end and QA testing that Test Studio is really great at. So there's kind of a middle ground that I'm looking at now in these sets of demos. So we're going to kind of not come full circle, but maybe back up a step and look at something in between. I'm going to talk a little bit about unit testing, a little bit about integration testing, and show some demos of just that kind of workflow with Blazor. And I think it's pretty interesting, especially if you come from other .NET backgrounds and, WPF and Silverlight and Xamarin and those type of things. Another thing I want to mention is I'm going to use standard Blazor stuff today. I'm not doing a Telerik UI application. The tools I'm going to show aren't quite working together the way I'd like them to. I think for testing Blazor apps, I think the Test Studio product is going to do the end-to-end tests perfectly for you. And these middle steps, there's still some pieces that we're waiting on from frameworks to kind of glue everything together nicely. But you can see where the direction is headed in general. So I've got some standard HTML components on the page here, and we'll take a quick look at what we're going to do.
Yeah, man, Test Studio will test anything. It doesn't care what it is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is conscious of the fact that you're throwing it a Blazor grid or whatever, but I mean, it'll test anything.
So what I'm about to show, like I'm using a unit test framework called BUnit, which is absolutely amazing. It's still in beta though. And then our tooling, we're looking at how to integrate better with that beta. And the more that the BUnit platform matures and Blazor matures, we're going to have a new release of Blazor here pretty soon. So there's going to be a lot of things that we need to catch up on with both BUnit and Telerik UI. So you'll see those things start to work better together soon. There's just so much moving pieces in a Blazor app with things like the JavaScript interop and the way that rendering works in Blazor with the render tree, which is the DOM abstraction that's used. So all those things are very, very complex. So we'll see these things align here pretty soon. But this is going to give you a good glimpse at how those things are going to look. I've got a simple form here. Yep.
Ed, do you have a drink next to you? We have been asked to hydrate.
I have the last sip of a glass of water that I chugged before we started.
Well, thank you, Ivana. Thank you for taking care of streamers. Yeah. What was your lunch?
I had a sandwich. I kept it basic. I had 30 minutes.
I had like...
It's not been the week for elaborate
like 15. Lunches. Yeah, no, it has not. But yeah, that's the fun.
So I've got, just the basic form here. We've got birth date, first name, last name, email, things like that. What I want to focus on is the birth date and these drop downs. We haven't built these yet. I'm going to use some like TDD type practices with a little bit integration testing to do this, and we'll play around with JustMock which is a really nice mocking framework, which is both free and commercial. So you can get started for free, continue to use it free. It's not like a free trial or anything like that. It's commercial version has some extra features that are really nice to have, but not necessary to get started. So the first type of thing that we might want to do is, first of all, let's kind of review how the forms work in Blazor. We have what's called the edit form component, and it takes a model. So this is kind of like an MVVM pattern here. We're going to bind all of our form elements to this model. So we have birth date, and you'll see me using the bind syntax here. So we got the birth date, my first name, last name, the email, and then I have some drop downs that are going to hold a region and then a team based on that region. So we're going to do some cascading drop downs in here. And again, these are all native HTML inputs with Blazor. They're native Blazor components as well that are included with the framework.
Hey, Ed, could you bump up your font size a little bit? I'm seeing a little bit of blurriness. Could be just a network blip.
Sure. Let's try to bump that up just a little bit more. And we'll go massive, yelling and screaming code interfaces.
Curious Drive, thank you for acknowledging. It's been a long week. I mean, this is webinar week for us. Plus, I had a conference session on Wednesday, I think, and then both Ed and me are speaking at another conference tomorrow. But again, sometimes like the fall comes in ebbs and webs, and we take time off. We'll take it a little easier.
So where did my test runner go? When I zoomed in on the window here, I need my test explorer. There we go. I had it pinned at one point, and it disappeared from existence. All right. So I've got some basic unit tests already covered in this. So one of the things I'm covering is my shared code that is in my Blazor app. So if we zoom out on a Blazor application, we can have client-side C# code, we can have server-side C# code, and we can share code between the client and the server. So I've got a set of projects that reflect that. I've got my front end, I've got my server, and I've got my shared. I'm unit testing all the things in the shared, which is some validation logic, which we don't really need to concern ourselves with this demo for, but I just wanted to point out that we're going to use one unit testing framework against an entire application full stack, which I think is pretty interesting. So I can test all of my shared logic and all of my client logic and my server logic as well. So I've got something testing a bunch of shared logic in this project. And then I will have some integration tests where I'm trying to find out how to best integrate this form with my project. And the first thing I've got here is a test that makes sure that I'm initializing my default value for the birth year. Because if I'm selecting a birth year, let's see if I can get my form back up here. We'll show that on the screen. I don't want to default to some zero value or default date value in C# because that's going to be like 0001 is like the default value. And then when I click on this drop-down box, I'm going to start from year 1 and try to work my way up to my birthday. I don't think so. So one of the things I want to do is just validate that when this form is created, that I expect it to start on the year 1980. That's kind of a good mid-year. That's realistic that I can work my way up or down from a user perspective. So I can do that with a basic X unit test. We'll assert that we have the expected value in that view model.
That's like 10 years after you were born.
It was pretty close. I remember something about the 80s here and there. So we've got a basic view model. This has no Blazor code in it whatsoever. This is just testing that when we initialize this class, we have a value set to 1980. If we look at it, it's pretty simple. We're just going to go in and create a new date time and set that to 1980 when it initializes. Not bad. But when we get into Blazor, things get a little bit more tricky. Like I said, there's a lot of moving pieces in here. There's a lot of page initialization that happens, lifecycle methods that run. And I want to do some more complex things. I want to load some data into this drop-down box, and I want it to do some things like select the default item, like the first item is default, and then go ahead and pre-populate the cascading dropdown as well. So I'm going to write some tests that revolve around that. So that's where BUnit comes in really handy. Sam put the link in there just a moment ago. You can find that at bunit.eaglehansen.com. It's up on the screen. Thanks, Sam. It's a really interesting test library that's in beta right now. He's done a phenomenal job putting that together. So let's look at how to create some unit tests in that. I didn't want to waste a bunch of time installing tools and things, so it's already installed. There's a great tutorial there right on the site that Sam shared on how to get it installed and running. So just, take away that it's already here and ready to run. So the next thing I want to do is write a unit test. And what I want to do is say that, let's see here. I want to find my initialization test. The font is so large here, I'm having a hard time scanning and seeing.
Yeah, you can bring it down a little bit. I think your camera was getting a little blurry, but your Visual Studio is okay.
Looks like I missed the test in here. I thought I had one set up for this, but what I'd like to do is make sure that when the page loads, that there's some data that actually is pulled into that drop-down list. So I want to write a test that says, all right, when the page loads, the view model gets updated with a list of regions. So we can do that. The first thing that we need to do is look at our page, or sorry, our view, and see what exactly is happening in that index page. So we've got our edit form, we've got our model, and notice I'm injecting a service here. So this is going to be something that I need to acquire as a dependency. So this is using an iData service, which is just a simple demo service that will get the regions for our drop-down box and get the teams by region. And I have a data service that I can call on the client application, but that's going to pose to be a little bit of a challenge from a unit test perspective. So let's go back over to our unit test. We'll go ahead and try to write a new unit test in here that will pull in that data from the service and populate the form. So we'll say initializes with region data. We can name these a little better, but that's something for a little bit of a refactor, right? We'll go ahead and make this a fact, because that's what it decorates this in XUnit to be a unit test. And then I'm going to go ahead and new up a user view model, a user form view model, which is the view model that's behind that page there that we want. And then we need to assert something. So I want to say assert. And we need to think about what exactly are we trying to check. We want to check that drop down and see if there is data inside of that collection. So I'm going to assert, I can say are equal, and we can set up a comparison here and give it a list of items that we want to compare with the data that is in there. So I'll give it a list. And
go ahead and bump up your fonts one more time, please.
Bump the fonts back up? Sure.
Yeah.
See if we can...
No,
I can work with that. So I'll look at my unit under test, and I'm going to check the regions, and we'll make sure that the regions match some value. So we need to set up an expected value as well. And let's see, I'm going to dig in to another folder here for a second and just grab some data. Maybe it's another, oh, sorry, let me scroll up and grab some data that we can borrow here as well. So we'll set up a new string, an array of strings. So our expected is a new array of strings. And I have something commented out, so you're going to see a lot of weird. Oh, I know it is. The application's running. There we go. We can get the tooling to stop yelling at us now. So we're going to check and make sure that our view model contains these values when it loads. Now, ideally, that page is going to get that information, though, from a service, right? It's going to call out to an HTTP service, and it would pull in some values from, say, an framework or some type of other REST endpoint. And we can't guarantee that the data is always going to be these values. So we need to test that against some sort of mock. And that's where just mock comes in really handy, is we can set up a mock service that we can guarantee what those values are going to be without even writing an alternative implementation of iData service. So our index page uses an iData service, and that is supplied through dependency injection. And if you look, the concrete type here is an HTTP data service, which is going to make a call out to a web API controller that's within the server project. And again, that data could change based on some data entry that's happened in the app, you name it. So instead of creating another concrete type that gives us some hard values back, we can actually just mock that out. And just mock is the Telerik product. Again, it's free. What I'm showing here is actually free to use. We can actually call on it and have it mock that service for us. What's really cool here is we can say, go ahead and mock, create an iData service. And that's pretty much all we need to create a implementation of that iData service. So it will go ahead and stub everything out for us. And then it's up to us if we want to arrange any type of the methods or properties on that class to respond back to us when we use it in our test environment. So what we can do with just mock is we can call mock.arrange, and we can point at different methods on that iData service and tell it what we'd like it to respond back with. We can do that with properties as well. What's nice about this is since I'm not creating another concrete implementation of iData service, if I have different tests that have different requirements from these method calls, I can just create a new mock very easily without having to pollute my project with a bunch of iData service implementations that support different types of test scenarios. So that's pretty neat. So what I'm going to do here is I'm saying mock.arrange, and then I can take my mock data service and say, when I call get regions, I'm going to go ahead and pass back a task result that contains the array A, B, C, D. And then when I call get teams by region, I'm going to go ahead and say any string argument is acceptable here. And I'm going to give it a function that will run and respond back on that method that's going to take the argument and place it inside of this array here. So I'll get back red, green, and blue concatenated with A, B, C, or D, whatever was passed into the string. So now I have an arranged data service that I can call in my unit test. This is BUnit helping us out here. So again, in our Blazor application, we have several services that are put into the dependency injection system and resolved in our components. This is a nice wrapper in our test framework that Eagle's put together that helps us with that. So the B-Unit framework is going to help us by rendering components for us, setting up an environment that mimics the dependency injection system of a Blazor application. And you can even traverse rendered DOM elements and things if you want to dig through those. We're not going to do that today. We're actually going to look at the results of the view model and see if it's changed. And all that's done through this test context that my class is inheriting from. So this service collection sits off of this test context. So if I have multiple tests that use this service, I don't have to keep repeating myself by creating these service references here. So now I've got my service layer set up. The next thing I need to do is render a component, the index component that I want to test. So we may actually get rid of this unit under test. We're using that for just testing this value, but in this scenario we need our actual index page. So I'll borrow a little code from below here, and we'll replace this. So I'm going to change this to component under test now, and we're going to render out an index page and then check for this expected value on our regions model. Now, since I'm using an actual rendered Blazor component here, I'm going to put dot, this is going to be component under test dot instance, and then I can say model dot regions. So now I'm actually pointing at the rendered instance of that index page and looking into the model and checking to see if the regions match that value. At this point, I believe I can go ahead and run this. And I've purposely left a bug in there. Let's see what we've got.
Convenient.
With our error here. Build failed, but it's not telling me why. And it passed that time. So that's interesting. Let's try that one more time. Let's go to our test explorer. We'll try to run all tests and see. All right. So it believes there is an error, but it won't tell me what it is. Failed.
You're on Windows. You could restart Visual Studio, restart Windows.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. So it's getting a compiler error, but it's not showing me what the compiler error is, so I can go off and fix it. So let's try this. Let's do a clean solution. These things can happen with Blazor at times. The rendering or Razor engine is very particular. We will rebuild the solution. And now it's saying all 5 have failed to build. All right, let's try this. We will close this out. We will come back.
All I'm hearing are excuses for Blazor.
This is actually .NET's finest moments here, or Visual Studio actually. I've had this happen from time to time, but it always wants to show up when you're doing a live stream. I think that's the important part. It's built into Visual Studio. It says if live streaming, then throw erroneous errors. I think that's how it goes. We'll try to build this again. Actually, what it might have been. Let's see if this actually builds. Okay, I'm going to make an assumption here. When I ran the project earlier, there may have been a thread still operating somewhere that was not letting this this instance loose. So let's go to Test Explorer. Let's see if we can run this, and it should light up red. I'm expecting it to fail for several reasons, and I'll get into those real quickly. All right, there we go. So we've got our failure here. And you can see I've got cannot provide a value for data service on type so-and-so. I've set up my mock in a method called add mock data services. I haven't called that yet. So I'm going to come down here and make sure that I add those mock services to my service collection. So now this will actually run and inject that mock data service in. So my index component can actually pick that up. I just kind of wanted to show real quick that you will get an error from your DI system that says that it cannot provide a value for property data service. That's a very common error that you'll see in Blazor applications if you forget to register something in your dependency injection pipeline. So now I'm getting an error that I can actually write some code against. So I've got my user test form is responding back. It expects a string, an array of strings, and it actually got nothing. It's got null here. So let's take a look at our form and let's see if we can fix this bad error that we got. So I'm going to cheat. I've already got this stuff stubbed out so we don't have to write it all live, so we don't have to have any more errors like we just had. And on my initialization lifecycle in my index page, what I'm going to do is go out and say my model.regions is going to await that get regions data service. And again, our mock is going to fill in here. So just mock is going to come in and say when get regions is called, we'll go ahead and give back that array. So let's go ahead and test that one out. We'll save this and we'll run the test again. And I should pass now because I've populated that drop-down box. Okay, so we're passing now. If I were to go back and run the application, you'll see that I have a drop-down box that is fully populated. But when I'm running the application, I'm not using my mock. I'm using my actual service that pulls in quite a lot of regions. And I don't have any behavior yet for selecting that item. So let's light up some more unit tests here, and this will go a little bit quicker now. I've got some other things that I would like for my form to do. So we'll go ahead and undo those unit tests. And you'll see I have some other requirements here. I want to, when the region item is selected, or when the form initializes, I want to select the first item in that region box. So we'll go ahead and light that up. When the region changes, it'll load the teams, so we'll get that cascading effect. So we're going to do that there. We'll select a region. We'll select the first value when the region is selected in the teams box as well. So here's what we're going to do. When we load this, it's going to select the very first item. When we select an item from it, it will load this box, and then it will also select the very first item in that box, leaving some defaults for our user. And we'll go ahead and run that test against all of it and watch it all fail, and then we'll go back through and we'll light that up with green. So you can see when the region is changed, we'll load the teams by region. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So what we're doing here is we're adding our mock service. We're going to render the index page, and then we're going to find the region select box, and we're going to change the value of it to BB. And that in turn should give us a result of a teams by region where they're all concatenated with BB. So we need to add some code to our page for that. So we'll go to our index page. And what we need to do is look here. And we have our region select. And we're going to go ahead and call a value changed method on it. So we're going to get the value that's changed. And when that value is changed, we'll go ahead and select that region. Then we'll make another data call to our data service and pass in that value to get teams by region. So we'll go ahead and get that cascading value from it. And then we want to make sure that the regions are also initialized, and we select that first item when the page loads. So we'll go ahead and clear up some more of those tests. We'll go ahead and run that one out. We should see, I think 2 of these will light up green. There they go. So we selected our first item. We're able to load those items when selected region changes. The last thing I want to do here is select the very first item when there is a change. So we're going to go back and select the first team when that loads. So again, on our selected region changed, after we call our get teams by region, we'll go ahead and grab the first item off of that list and make that our selected team. So now we can go ahead and run our tests again, and all of our tests will light up. And notice we did this entire workflow without opening the browser. So that's pretty cool. If we come back to our browser, though, and we refresh this, you'll notice I have, first of all, my first drop-down is selected. I can select an item, and there is my cascading value being selected as well. So we've got kind of that red-green refactor process, but we're actually rendering components. We're mocking a data service. That data service then, when the full application loads, goes out and gets an HTTP call. That is something that can change versus our mock that is static, something that we know exists. If we can write solid tests against, which is pretty cool.
Cool. The chat room has been telling you, Ed, like Ed is being Ed and taking out more time and not leaving much for me. But that's all right.
Sorry, that one test got away from me, I think. I apologize, Sam.
No worries. And this is cool, like seeing JustMock in action with a Blazor app. And I mean, we were talking about this during the webinar. So JustMock is getting support for .NET 5. And it also does like code coverage when you push it out to a CI/CD pipeline. And before I get going, let's have a quick round of a big applause for Ivana. So she's our teammate, and it's close to like 9 p.m. and she's been at this whole week, and she's been with us during our entire stream. So thank you, Ivana, for being around and keeping us going. All right.
Concede my screen share back to you.
All right. So this is where things are going to get messy.
Good night, Eva.
All right. Let's see. T Karthik 2020. I don't know if you're still around, but this is the reporting time. And I'm going to do a single monitor share because I'm on my main dev machine, and I got the stream and other things going in my streaming PC. So you are going to see the matrix going. Hang on.
Hope I spelled that right.
Ding. Uh-oh. All right. Ah, beautiful matrix. Inception. So I'm not going to look at that tab, okay? Ed, if you can take over. Or first up, like, do you want to hang out with me while I do this?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right,
and take your time. I know you've been on a while. You're probably one that wants to get off. But
no, I'm good. I got my drink.
Feel free to reclaim your time back.
Yeah, I'm good. I got a hard stop at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. I'm going to get a snack out for the kid. But I am going to be in this mode where I'm not looking at the browser tab. But if you can take over highlighting messages for us, please, so I can focus a little bit on the code. All right, so this is where it's going to get messy because I'm going to show you. In fact, it's good to have you, Ed, to kind of see where. Hydrate. Yes, thank you, Curious Drive.
I'm out of liquids.
You can go ahead and get some if you want.
I have another cup of coffee. That's not
there you go. I saw your tweet the other day on how the standard Keurig or the little pods make how crappy that coffee is. That's what I have. So stop insulting the regular folks, okay? So we talked about reporting. And we're talking about two different things here. We have reporting solutions, which is how you build your reports on any platform, and then you pull in data however you want. I'm going to hide this little thingy here. There you go. And then you are also talking about Report Server, which is a hosted turnkey solution. So you can store your reports, you can manage the versioning of your reports, and also delivering and scheduling your reports. So that's what we're talking about. Let me show you this in action. And I'm going to do the thing that everybody hates me for doing, but parallels. Because this is my dev machine. I like keeping everything in one place. So Windows 10. So let me show you what I have and then what I don't have. I was hoping to build it. We have half an hour, so I might get halfway there. We'll see.
Well, if you just used Windows and all these...
I am on Windows.
These hoops to jump through, Sam.
Okay, so if you headed out to Telerik Reporting and hit that button, or if you already have it, then just go to like telerik.com. In your download section, you can go get the bits, and then you get to light it up. So I already have it installed, and one of the things that you get. So this, by the way, this is my Windows machine. So this installs in let's see. C, most likely program files. No, probably x86. Yep, progress. And this one's a new machine, so it doesn't have the past version. So this is where everything is. And you can see it gives you like the binaries, it gives you the examples and the tools and so on. What is chat room talking about? Oh, okay, curious, right? Yeah, I don't know what that meant in Bulgarian, but I hope it meant bye.
It was see you soon.
Okay, good. All right. So one of the things you get is in this report designer little thing, you get what's called a standalone report designer. So everything that I'm doing here is driven off my local machine, and that's running SQL Server. It doesn't need to be. It can be in the cloud, under your desk, wherever you want to be. So we'll give it a second to come up and guess the database that I'm using, Ed. We are back to 2010, and we are using AdventureWorks. See that? This
AdventureWorks. Wow.
Yeah, it's back. Yeah, I mean it's a good example database because it has like 20 plus tables, and they're all related, so it kind of works out, right? So that's what I'm using. That's where the data is coming from. We don't need to look at the database at all because we just have a connection string that's pointing to it. So this is how you kind of get started with reporting. I'm going to show you like 3 solutions, and then I was going to build the third solution if I have time. So this is a standalone IDE sort of a thing. Well, kind of a designer. And you can drag and drop a whole bunch of things. So let me show you kind of a sample report that I was just building. So everything is a TRDP file. It's a Telerik report definition file. So we get to define all of the components of our report in one place, and then it's embedded in the report, so it knows how to run. So this one is just a blank slate. We can do whatever we want in it. This one here is kind of the report header. This one here is the details section, and then I had some like barcodes and stuff like that in the footer. So you get to control this however you want. You can bring in images like that. That one's an image. And what I did here was, if I go into my data view, you see all of these like data sources that light up. So that's what you want. Guess what new trick Telerik Reporting learned? Blazor. Yes, I'll show you Blazor. Hang on.
It's coming up, guys.
It's coming up. Okay, so these are my data sources. If I need to bring them in, OpenEdge, Entity Data Source, all of the good stuff. So what I have here is this little guy, which is hard to see. It's too small in here. But when I right-click and configure, this is a data source, essentially, right? So this can point to anywhere you want, any connection string. In this case, it's pointing to my local connection string, which is pointing to that AdventureWorks thingy. So this one is using a shared connection. Now, I like this one option here, which what it does is it actually embeds the connection string in the report definition itself. So you don't have to deal with this in any other app. But this one, we're just going to do it shared. And that's my SQL. Okay, so we're down to just the basics of how relational stuff works. This is a select star from some table, employee table. And that's it. So you can write whatever stored procs or select statements you want, and that's it. And you can execute. So if I fire this up, like you see that it's bringing stuff back from my table, and that's it, right?
I love that we're able to test it right there.
Yeah, of course. Yes, I do want to cancel that. All right, so that's my one data source that's actually feeding this table here. So if I go configure this, you will see that it's using that particular SQL or that particular data source. And the employee data sources, they show up here as well. Everything is very configurable. So let me go ahead and run this. And when it comes to like the components you want to put on the report, I mean, this is your canvas, right? Do whatever that you feel is good for you. You're not going to be lacking in components, tables, maps, a variety, like a dozen or so charts and graphs, and you think of it, it's almost there, barcodes, picture boxes. The picture boxes, by the way, now support SVG, so vector images, so you can zoom in as much as you want. We preserve the markup in the report definition itself, and no matter what platform you export it out, we can maintain the fidelity of the reports.
And those outputs, I think, are based off of Kendo UI, isn't that right?
Which outputs?
Like the charts,
This
the graphs, the data grids, things like
that. Depends. Some of it is like if you're running it on desktop, there is no Kendo UI.
Ah, gotcha.
So yeah, this does it on its own. So if I go ahead and preview mode, you will see that this is the report. So it's actually pulling stuff out. Like this particular SQL had some like joins, so it's pulling it from like 2 different tables, and this one's the SQL just straight up from the employee table. And I got a barcode here. This one's like a date time. So just a simple report, and it's working, right? So we'll stop there. So what it does is when you go through this, like set up your data sources, set up however you want, point it to whatever you want, customize things. There's a properties editor. There is a report explorer. So this, what you see here, this is the visual tree. Like we are also used to like web and desktop. Like this is reporting at its core. And this is what makes it so difficult to just do your own, because it takes a lot of engineering. So this is the entire visual tree, like the details section, the header section, all of it is right here. You get to move things around. You get to do however you want to do. Yeah, report card for ninjas. Okay, so that's my report, okay? And when I'm done with this, I save it, and it gets saved into a single file. And that's one TRDP file, and that is sitting on my C drive, right? So so far, I mean, this has just been basic report creation. I think, no, not on my Mac, on my C drive. See that? That's just the one report file. So what I built here, Ed, are 2 solutions. One is web, and one is a WPF thing, and I want to build something else. So let's go pull up Visual Studio. And this guy. So here's what we are doing here. So you have a reporting solution that is local, and you have built your report. Now, how do you deliver that report? Let's say you're building a web-based application, or you want to have delivered somewhere else. But the crux to delivery is a service, right? Because no matter what the client is, the client will not have the power of the full reporting engine, and you don't want everything to run on the client side either. Because that's going to be heavy and it's going to take forever. But the reporting engine needs to be able to process and the report definition, pull out the data and render the report, and then send it off to the client. So what you end up doing for just about everything is using a REST service. That is your gateway into reporting, and then you can deliver it to whatever platform you want. So this one here, Ed, will look familiar. This is just a standard ASP.NET Core project. Nothing different going on, right? So the things we do, and this is all very well documented in the docs, just a couple of things. So in startup, if I can go down here, so we do use Newtonsoft. We are thinking of switching over to the new system.json, but Newtonsoft works for the most part, and it's here. Then this is not a reporting thing. This is just an ASP.NET setting that says I can deliver multiple images or JSS or CSS simultaneously. This is the one line of code that we need. And essentially what it does, it sets up a singleton instance of the report service configuration, and it says, I'm going to use local in-memory storage for whatever temporary files I need, and then the system path.combine is a thing called reports. So that is where it's going to go look for your report definitions, right? So the reporting engine needs the definitions to go pull the data and realize what it is that it has to do. And that is something that you get to configure anywhere you want. In my report folder, I just have 2 of these things sitting out here. This report one is the same report that I created, and then this one's a different report, just to kind of show you. So that's all it needs, really. And then we get into...
Sam, can you zoom just a little bit more?
Yeah.
I think it's StreamYard itself. It's because we're not, here, I'll switch for a second. It's not in the full screen view like that.
Yeah.
Since we have our wonderful faces here on the left-hand side, it needs a little bit more font real estate.
There you go. How does this look? Oh, no, don't take our faces away. Yeah, you're back. Sorry. Okay. We did that one line of code. And then this can be just like any other web API controller. So you right-click. Thanks, Curious Drive. Yes. So you right-click and you say add a new controller, and it's just a web API. This is web API running on top of ASP.NET Core and MVC project. All we're doing here is we are setting up this route to say anybody can come to this service at that API /reports, and we're going to serve up the reports. And this is just a boilerplate code, one line to say I'm a reports controller. That's essentially all it needs. And in this one, I did not embed the connection string, so I actually do have the connection string in the app itself. But if you embed that in the report, then you don't need that in the app itself. Then I have what else? Nothing going on in my layout, but the index CS/HTML page. So now we are doing two different things. Now within the single app, we are using it as a REST service, which is the report controller, and then we also want to have a client, which is what's going to show the report, right? So if you want to separate this out, absolutely go ahead and do that. But you're going to see that course, like the what's the thing called, cross origin something, right? Report, no. You get a cross domain error. So and there are easy ways to kind of get around that. So you can allow that. So only thing I'm doing here is pulling in Kendo UI. Like you mentioned, this is the web, so we get to use Kendo UI. Min CSS, and then this is that one line of code. So this div tag is the one that's going to render the report for this particular web application, and I am pulling in a Telerik report viewer. Where do you get this JavaScript file? This is the one that I did not show yet. In my references, there is a package that is the Telerik Reporting ASP.NET Core package. This is a reporting viewer for the web, and that's what we're pulling in. So it needs a JavaScript thing to set up. It's a jQuery-based thing, so it sets it up and it knows how to talk to that RESTful service. Beyond that, once the DOM is ready, we're going to say go to that URL and grab this report, and that's it. I mean, it has like a bunch of other, like a dozen or so properties that you can scale and do other things, but that's the crux of it. So Ed, you with me so far?
Absolutely, Sam.
All right.
It's a nice viewer for ASP.NET Core, and we have one for Blazor as well.
Not yet. This is still MVC. Okay.
We'll get there, but we have them both.
Yes. So what you see is just a cleaned out MVC view. I've taken out like the home and the about thing that shows up at the top. Mm-hmm. So this is the report viewer. The web-based report viewer works the same everywhere. So if you have an Angular or a Vue application or a PWA, this is the same viewer you're going to get. We wrap it up for different applications a little differently. And this is showing the same report with the same fidelity as you saw on the desktop version, and you can import, export, and all that good stuff, right? So this is working, and it's working off that localhost thing. So while this is working, I'm going to show you one more thing, because the world does not center around the web as Ed would like it to be.
Or as it should be.
Oh, Curious Drive, you're killing me. Crystal reports. No, it's all good, man. It's all good. In fact, during the webinar, like we had some questions like, I'm not going to say bad things about the competition. You look at essentially the docs, the support, the demos, the flexibility of pulling to any data source. Like with something like SSRS, like you're taking a server-side hard dependency. This is kind of an embedded solution, and we can actually export things out of Crystal reports if you want to migrate out. Oh, Jeff Weeks is here. New to Telerik tools and Blazor. Why would you want to use product tech? Oh, you just picked on what I just said.
Yeah.
Jeff Weeks, thank you, by the way, for tuning in. Welcome to the family if you're new. We do a lot of things to make developers successful, and reporting is kind of one of those like key things that enterprises need. And SSRS, again, nothing bad about it, but I'm not going to trash talk our competition, but you see what you get. Like you're stuck to SQL Server. Here, it's an embedded solution, works on really any desktop. It's a .NET-based solution. You can deliver it to anything. Take a look at this page and some of the things it can do, like some of the bindability to any data source, being able to build 3 different ways, 3 different report designers, VS, standalone, and web-based. and then being able to visualize it on any app, being able to export it out to any of these things. And then when you get into report server, the scheduling of things, the management and the versioning of reports, that's all what we bring to the table. And you get me and Ed. So how can you beat getting us for reporting?
We don't have sales folks on here with us, but from what I understand, the licensing terms are generally easier with us as well. But that's something you probably want to talk to some true sales folks about. But that's just something I'm aware of.
All right. Yeah, I want to cancel that. It was trying to upgrade. Okay, so let's take a look. So we had a RESTful service. I think this is still working, is it? Yeah, it's still up. So what I pulled up here is WPF, right? So in here, my reference changed a little bit. So now I have, where is it? Telerik report viewer.wpf. Okay, so slightly different NuGet package. You bring it in, and that's it. And in fact, I think we give you like a Visual Studio template as well to create this, which you don't need to. You can roll your own. So in this one, we are actually, when you set up that thing, the configuration says, do you want to use a standalone REST service that you already have? Do you want to point somewhere? In this case, I am pointing straight back to localhost 49776 API reports. So my RESTful service, right? So I'm pointing to the ASP.NET RESTful service, and I'm saying, here's the report definition file. That's the file that I want to render out. And then if I look at my XAML, which is somewhere here, the report viewer, that's the one that does the rendering, and the rest is all given. And in our app.xaml, we are simply pointing to the new XAML page. And when you bring in the NuGet package, it actually puts in some of the themes. So we can light up things like Office 2019. So fingers crossed, if I go ahead and run this, and hopefully the service is still up and running, it's trying, and it's done. Okay, so see that? So this is a WPF app, right? This is pulling out the same report that we just saw from the standalone report designer. It ran it against the database. We saw it working on the web. Now this is working on WPF. If you want to do WinForms, just switch up. Yeah, that was quick. Thank you. You can just like switch up the NuGet package and then get the one for WinForms, and it's the same report engine, and it just spits out the same report. So, Ed, with me so far, desktop is working. We got web, we got desktop, right?
Nice.
Let's take this to the next level, because I know the world centers around Blazor, right? So
I thought you were going to run it on the Doom engine.
Flutter? I don't know about Flutter. In fact, like I want to get into it. I'll do some streams on Flutter. I've never done Flutter, so I'm curious. And I hear the dev loop is very good, but it's just not native. It is not native at all, no matter what somebody tells you. It is using a lot of Skia Sharp. It's great. It's functional, it's fast, but it's not native. And maybe it doesn't matter. All right. Marvin, Ed, feel free to highlight anything that you want in the chat room. I worked with Crystal Reports for years. Oh, thank you. Thank you for moving to Telerik Reporting. Yeah, absolutely. You're comfortable with Crystal. No problem with that. Okay, enjoying it, but wishing for more intelligence. Okay, we hear you. I have my Twitter handle down under my camera. I don't know why Ed doesn't. So get a hold of us, okay? If you have a specific thing that you're looking for where we could do better, let us know, and we will hook you up with the engineering team and the PM so they can fix the things that you're looking for.
My Twitter handle and my name are the same, so I'm basically missing an @ symbol.
All right. Okay, so this, my friends, is Blazor. Okay, and this is actually cutting edge, not bleeding edge Blazor, because it is running on WebAssembly. So how do I arrive here? You do File, New Project, Blazor, and you pick the client side, the WASM one. You could do the server-side thing, but then that's really no different compared to like running an MVC and just delivering the report to the client side. This is really running it client side in WebAssembly. So what do you have here in the shared repo? I don't think I even touched it. This is like you can see the weather forecasting is still there. This is kind of what the default template is. So the server side, we can treat the server-side Blazor component in this case, not component, but the app, to be just our RESTful service. Like that's going to be the RESTful interface that gives us the report definition, goes out to get the database, fetch the data, build the report, and then just like push it out to the client side. So this one will have pretty much exactly the same code that I had in the other one. So here is my startup. So you're going to see me do that one line of code right here. Adds a singleton reference and points it to a folder. I am hoping that's called reports. And this one here, the reports thing, you'll notice it has it right there, right? So that's the report I'm pulling in. And you can switch it around, by the way. So this is so nice because the report definition just needs to be on file on the server somewhere. And if you have the connection strings embedded, you can throw in any number of reports and it'll deliver them all. In fact, in one of the demos, like I had a little drop down so you can switch which report you're looking at. And it's all Telerik report definition. It's all very swappable. It's just a file that it's looking for. So I have that. And then in my controller, you're going to see me do the exact same thing. It's got that report controller that's inherits of that. And that's all we need. And that's the route API reports, right? Now, that's the server part of it. And now we get to the client side. And in here, okay, Ed, where does the default file live in for Blazor?
If it is a client-side app, it's the index HTML page.
This one?
If
No,
you're looking,
that's the CSS.
That's the bootstrapper. Are you looking for
just the first page of the app?
Index.
What is index
right
Blazor? Oh, I already had it open. Jeez. Okay, so this is what we're doing. We are using Telerik Report Viewer, right? So now we are switching. Yes, thank you, Curious Drive. I'm not a Blazor guy, as you can tell, but it helps to have both of you who have devoted their lives to Blazor in here with me. So this is taking Blazor, stripping out all the stuff that comes with it. This little div tag here, report viewer 1, you can call it whatever you want. That's my div tag. And I have some styles here. I think there's a minimum width. Like beyond that, it becomes like too small. Like you don't want to render a report that's like a slice and you can't see the rest and you have to scroll. But then that's all it needs. And then you can style it however else you want. This one is using a service URL. So API reports, right? So pointing to the same RESTful endpoint that we just saw on the server side thing. Report source, again, points to report 1. Now, keep in mind, this report 1 is nowhere to be found on the client side because this is not what the client side thing is meant to do. It's simply saying, I want that report definition, and then scaling is whatever you want. So if I go ahead and run this thing, localhost, now a different port. You see Blazor, and you see the report. Right. Yeah, I like how clean it is to use. That is kind of the minimum that you need. I'm showing kind of a hello world thing here with reporting, really. But this is running literally client side. Now, when I say literally, it's not rendered literally on the client side because that's not what we want to do. But the reporting engine sits on the Blazor server side project, and it knows the report definition, gets the data, and just pushes it out to the client side. So this is WebAssembly. And if you did MVC, then it'll be the same as pushing it out from the server side. Can you run the code in WPF, Razor, and Blazor? Which code? So the WPF code has a different report viewer. This one is using the Blazor report viewer. So this is essentially a wrapper. It is still sort of the HTML5 wrapper, but this one is, so the properties of this thing are opened up for a Blazor syntax, like a Razor syntax. Yeah.
I think he was more in agreement than asking a question.
Okay. Yes. Sorry, I didn't catch that. So again, yeah, I mean, similar code. Like I do a lot of XAML, and I'm fine with writing Blazor code like this. It's just like setting properties on it. Mm-hmm. So this works, and we have report viewers really everywhere that you can think of. Now it's 2:20 p.m. There's no way we can do this in 10 minutes, but I can show you what I was going to build before Ed came and took over all the time. That is this little guy here. Let me bring it up. Launch the demos. Okay, So when you look at the demos that we have, it's a whole bunch of reporting. I mean, every little component that you can think of. Jeff Weeks is saying, it's nighttime. You do not want a cranky kid. Let me tell you about it. I mean, he's been really nice and quiet because he knows, like, mom is teaching a class and I'm doing this. So he is hanging out with his babysitter for now. Like, hangry has consequences, we have learned. Okay, so you get all types of reports, but this thing here is really sweet, right? And this is called the Web Report Designer, right? So think about this. Like, you are trying to deliver reports, and you have report definitions, you have viewers for your web, your desktop solutions, but then you keep having non-technical users wanting to do their own thing with your reports. Like, they want to design their own reports, and you do not want to give them access to the report definitions in Visual Studio or in the standalone thing. What you would likely want to give them is a lightweight thing. Well, and actually, it's not quite lightweight. It's actually almost like feature parity with the desktop things. But this is what you want to give them. And this is no magic. Like, you get to create this, and you get to create this in your ASP.NET solution. And then you get to ship it. So your users who are on web get to use this in their web application. Let me go ahead and shut down my VM so it's not sitting there and just chugging through my memory. Where's my browser? There you go. So this one here is pretty sweet, and I will bump this up a little bit. So this one here, if you look at the components here, like, this is drag and drop, right? So picture box, barcode, shapes, different types of tables, charts and graphs, obviously, that's what we are known for. You get to just drag and drop. It's what you see is what you get type report definition, and then you have for whatever you click on, like this one here, like, you get all of the properties light up. So again, this is pretty much what you would want to do to kind of design your own report. And what else? So if I go into the Explorer here, this is going to give you a view like the way we saw in the desktop thing. Here's your report header. Here's your detail, parameters. Like, if you want to put in parameters that the report will get from the user, you can do that, styles and whatever else. So all of that is there. And then this data source is where a lot of the magic happens. So in this data source, this is using, this one's just a dummy thing. It's showing that I'm using a connection string. And this one here is just straight up SQL, right? And you don't want your users to write them, but I mean, you can give them access to the data source. And if it's like a non-SQL data source, if it's like a JSON or a CSV, which are two new things we did, that's pretty easy. And then that's a wizard that we give you. So what I'm trying to show you is, like, this whole thing, this is running in still in edit mode. And then when you go into preview, like, that's what the report is actually going to look like, right? So the user gets to design it and then run it as well. So how do you get this whole thing? It doesn't come out of the box. It's not hosted anywhere. It actually can be hosted if you use, like, Report Server, which is a full-on turnkey solution. But this is something you can actually do by hand. And this is what I was about to do, which maybe I will do on another stream. So here's what we need to do. I actually pulled up the docs because I wanted to do this. So this is a report designer. And you don't have to do much as a developer, because much of this is actually it's objects that you expose, and that's it. So you start out using an ASP.NET Core application. You now, instead of just getting reporting, you get report designer services. So you change up, you get one more NuGet package. Yeah, curious, right? This is cool. So you are essentially giving your users the right to design their own reports. So in the configuration startup, like, Ed, see if you can point out anything that stands out to you. I mean, I didn't see anything out of ordinary. So this is startup.cs in an ASP.NET Core. Config file name. So this is, well, just pointing to app.json, which it does anyways. Web host. I don't know if this is there. Environment. No, it's there.
Yeah, that's all default stuff.
That's all default. Okay.
Yeah.
Configure services, right? So this is where you're going to see a few more things. So you have configuration service, which is what we had, but now you have a report source resolver. No, I think we already had this. This is just pointing to report definitions. And I think this part is the new thing, report configuration. Storage is file storage, report resource resolver. I don't know what this is doing.
It's the last two lines, actually.
Yeah, I think this is pretty boilerplate just for the
It says,
code.
if you look at the comment on the top line, it says configure dependencies for report services, and then the final one says for designer.
Right. Yep. So essentially, that's all you have to do. So this one is also pointing to the reports definition files, and that's it. It's just a few lines of configuration to say, give me instances of that report designer. And then we set up the report designer as a REST service. So here's my controller. Now it is API instead of just reports, it's report designer. And we inherit off a different thing, a report designer controller. And the web report designer, this is just a shell that you're going to add inside of your index CSHTML or index HTML for Blazor. This one here, let me take a look. A couple of meta things that doesn't look like anything concerning us. Here's the div tag. That's the placeholder that's going to host the web report designer. We have a few scripts. Again, nothing out of the ordinary. Oh, we do have Kendo UI. And then this is what we had for the report viewers, right? That's the JS. And then looks like we throw in one more JavaScript file. And I think this might be an inner op if you're doing it on Blazor. So that's the web report designer. And this one here, just load up the designer and make it a Telerik web designer. It's got a bunch of properties, service URL, point to the report designer, point to the exact report definition file. That's it. Okay? And that's all you need. That's what you need to open up a view like this, right? And I think somebody was asking in the morning, like, and this is something I need to check with engineering, like if you wanted to lock down the data source so your user doesn't get to see the SQL, doesn't get to mess around with that. I think there's a way to do that. I just don't know.
Probably could do that through SQL itself. Just lock the tables to certain permissions. You probably have to set up permissions for the reporting tool itself to access the SQL tables.
Yeah.
And you would create a profile, a user profile for that, and then lock it just to the tables you want it to be able to see in those views. So you work with your DB, what do you call it? Database admin. Yeah. DBA. Forgot a letter. Work with your DBA on that, and I'm sure it's just as easy as SQL permissions can handle that.
Yeah, and that's kind of like maybe like you're restricting access, but like somebody was asking, like, can I just not show the data source at all in the designer? And I think we may be able to do that. I just don't know how.
You just put a little piece of black tape over that user screen, and in the spot the UI shows up.
Yeah. All right, so this whole shenanigan here, and you were talking about Kendo UI before, like this is using Kendo UI, the report designer itself. So like this whole thing, this is a tree view. So this is how we dog food our own stuff. Like the components, that's another something. It's like a docking thing that we are using from Kendo UI, I'm sure. So this is pretty easy to set up. Like you see the number of lines of code here that it takes, just a few lines. This is essentially the entire scripting thing that lights up that one div tag, and all you have to do in your service is just like 2 extra lines of configuration, and you have a designer on the web. So yeah. Ed, any questions on reporting?
No, Sam, I think you did a great job explaining all this stuff. I've never dove into the reporting universe, and you've gone way in depth on this, further than I ever have, and are able to bring it down to my level, which is amazing.
Yeah, thanks. It's a different world. I mean, honestly, like not many devs dive into this, but like we have been talking about this trend a whole lot, where like we are all cogs in a wheel, and the loops are getting tighter and tighter. Like you see how many devs are doing DevOps. You see how much we are doing like pipelines and automated testing. So this is just maybe one more thing where if you know how to deal with SQL and write to databases and write stored procs, it's a matter of just designing it. So yeah, thanks, Curious Drive. Thank you for hanging out with us.
Yeah. So at the job I had prior, it was like if anything in the company we purchased had a set of curly braces in it somewhere, like I was tasked with that thing. So I definitely understand, developers needing to get into these type of tools and use them. So it's near and dear to my heart. But fortunately, I never delved into the reporting realm as much as I did developing custom things.
Yeah. All right, folks. I think this wraps up webinar week for us. It's been fun. It's been a lot of work, but a lot of fun to kind of take the time to dive into these products that are near and dear to our hearts. And hopefully you see that we are trying to enable developer success anyhow we can. So Kira's Drive and Jeff Weeks and everybody else, Martin Vendick, thank you all. Thank you all for hanging out with us. Ed, thanks for taking the time to show off JustMock, which is not something I deal with a whole lot. So
it's been a fun webinar week, Sam. So I think I was able to weave in Blazor into literally every product except for Angular and React and Vue. And even then, I think I was able to convince TJ we could put a Blazor view in the React editor at one point. So we may have to pull that demo off next time we do a show.
I was talking about mobile stuff today, and that has Blazor. So yeah, it's everywhere. Yeah. All right, folks, I'm going to go play my piano here. No, I'm kidding. I'm too lazy to bring down the green screen, so it stays up. So that's it from us, and thank you so much, everyone. We love you, and we'll see you on the next stream.
Absolutely. Next week, we have streams all week long on this channel. We have Sam. You have 2, right?
4 actually.
You have 4 next week. Holy cow!
I do 4 every week. You just don't hang out with me.
I thought you had 2. So Sam's got 4 streams. I've got 2 coming up. I've got a talk show on Monday and a new Blazor stream on Wednesday called the Blazor Power Hour. We're gonna just dive into like Q&A like as fast as possible on that one. So it's gonna be something we develop over time. I need you all's help for that. And then Friday, of course, I have my stream as usual too. So join us all next week, Sam.
Yeah. All right. Take it easy. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay productive, and we'll see you around. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.